like we're gonna.
Just don't have your email. So I can send it as a packet.
All right. So I think we're good to go. Linda, I think you're on the
So maybe about a minute. 1 minute, which is fine.
You're on mute. Okay. Let's try it.
Okay, and if it was not enough technical difficulties, my camera is not going on, so I'm gonna try to go at it this way.
They're broadcasting now.
They are broadcasting now. Excellent. All right, good morning all. Welcome to today's meeting of the Board of Directors of the Salton Sea Authority. Still adjusting a couple things here in the building so that we can transmit this meeting.
You're on the device, so it's not a weird.
All right, seems like we've got this under control now. Welcome to today's meeting of the Salton Sea Authority. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you will please join me in the flag salute, please stand. Ready, begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Madam Secretary, can you please conduct roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Director Plancarte.
Here.
Director Kelly. Director Perez. Director Hewitt. He's got an all-day conflict. Director Santillanes. Director Tortes. Okay, try again. He's online and raised his hand.
Yes,
Director
Ken Torres here. I'm having problems trying to get in, but I'm here.
Thank you. Director Bianco. He's also online. You may unmute to speak. You may, okay. Director Estrada.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Cardenas. You're present. And Director Hanks.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite members of the public for public comment. This
Mr. President, before you move in that direction, if I could, I see Director Hanks has his hand raised and his microphone is unmuted. I don't know if it's muted now, so I don't know if he had an issue, but I did notice his hand raised, and because of the technical difficulties, I wanted to address that.
Thank you. Director Hanks?
I hope the hand has been low.
We'll assume it's down.
No difficulties.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This public comment time is reserved for comments on matters that are not on action items on the agenda. You are invited to speak to any specific action item listed in the agenda as the item is called. All other agenda items should be addressed at this time. Any member of the public may address the board relating to any matter within the authority's jurisdiction. Those present in this room who wish to speak, please fill out a request to speak form and provide it to the board secretary. To make comment for those attending in Zoom, please raise your hand using the star 9 feature to be acknowledged. When you are acknowledged, please state your name for the record and address the board through the chairman. Remarks shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. California law prohibits members of this board taking any action on items that are not on today's agenda. So with that, do we have anybody in chambers that wishes to make public comment for items not on the agenda? Madam Secretary, do we see anybody online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Michael Cohen, would you like to speak?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just a quick question, I guess. There was some conversation yesterday at the state's SSMP Long Range Plan Committee about the Army Corps feasibility study, and then trying to move forward with their long range plan to meet the timing of the Army Corps feasibility study. And I'm curious if there are any updates from Mr. O'Dowd or others about the status of that, or if that's going to be covered in the federal report, or if we'll hear about this in a future meeting. So just, I guess, really just looking for a status update from the authority on where the feasibility study is and how that might move forward. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'll touch on that in my director comments.
Thank you, Mr. O'Dowd. Anybody else online for public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ronald Spears.
Yes, good morning. Can the board hear me?
We do.
Yes. Good morning, board members. My first question is, I would like to know if Mr. Jeremy Brooks of the Bureau of Reclamation is in attendance in the audience, or can hear me, or is on Zoom and possibly can hear me.
You may continue with your public comment, sir.
Okay. My name is Ron Spears, and I am president of the Bahia Del Mar Property Owners Association. And we represent the property owners located on the channels at Desert Shores. I want to direct my public comment to Mr. Jeremy Brooks of the Bureau of Reclamation. I would first like to thank the Bureau of Reclamation for awarding a $1.25 million grant for the Desert Shores Channel Restoration Project. Our Property Owners Association is actively involved in the Desert Shores project and has been named in the grant award from the Bureau of Reclamation as being a party that will be involved in the operation and maintenance of the project. In our fiduciary responsibility to our members, we created the Desert Shores Channel Restoration Oversight Committee that is tasked with the responsibility of oversight of all aspects of the Desert Shores project to make sure there is complete transparency and that funds appropriated for the project are spent wisely for their intended purpose and on budget. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of our association to open a constructive dialogue with the Bureau of Reclamation and work cooperatively with the Bureau to ensure a successful completion of the Desert Shores project. That ends my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Secretary, anybody else?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tom Sefton.
Good morning, Salton Sea Authority directors.
Tom, you're muted.
Good morning. I hope I'm able to be heard now.
We hear you.
Thank you. I want to give a quick informational update and thank you, board and staff and public for listening. 2 weeks ago, we received a report, 2 reports, in fact, from the UC Santa Cruz not so independent review panel that was hired by the State Resources Agency to review and make an evaluation on projects proposed to import water to restore the Salton Sea. You should be aware, and if any of you who have read the reports will be aware, that the panel chose to evaluate none of the request for information proposals that were submitted. 3 of them passed their fatal flaw criteria. However, none were evaluated in the final reports. The panel instead chose to create their own 3 proposals, first of which cherry-picked some of the most expensive, least environmentally beneficial, and least beneficial to Mexico ideas, and put it together with the panel's own ideas and created essentially a Frankenstein's monster creation of their own by sewing together some ideas from RFI and some of their own into an incredibly expensive and essentially designed to fail water import scenario. They then proceeded to do 2 more, one based on a Black and Beach study that was done for state of Arizona, which proposed to import 100,000 acre feet of water by doing a desalination in Mexico and an exchange at Morelos Dam with a pipeline to bring water up there. They took the inflated the cost of that Black and Beach pipeline by a factor of 10 in their final report, and got it up from a little over 1 billion to 12 billion in cost just to get from halfway down Sonora State up to the Morelos Dam. That's just an example of the cost inflation that the panel imposed on the concepts. And then they finally came up with a recommendation to do 100 million gallons per day of desalination at the Salton Sea, which would take half of the brine and put it in giant evaporation ponds and then load it and ship it out. None of these proposals is viable, and none were probably really genuinely intended to be viable. It is unfortunate that the panel refused their contracted responsibility to evaluate the proposals in the RFI. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Steve Jones.
Yeah, good morning. How are you? Related
Good morning.
to the last individual that spoke, I also submitted a Word document and a PowerPoint file regarding importation from the Sea of Cortez. And unfortunately, I didn't submit it under the title that you wanted it. So you have the documents there, but whatever. So yeah, with respect to, I don't quite understand how the current situation is that's proposed is going to mitigate the evaporation aspect, which is the root cause of this problem. And another question that I have for you is that I would like to have you place on your website the report from UC Santa Cruz for review by other people so that they can see exactly what went into the study and what their elements were in considering their down selects. So another question I have is why UC Santa Cruz was selected and not UC Riverside, since UC Riverside is much closer and has a much closer relationship to the Salton Sea than UC Santa Cruz. So if at the end of the meeting you choose to pull up the charts that I sent to you, stick around to go over those with you. But I have a lot of questions regarding what is going on. And I remember coming to the Salton Sea when I was probably 18 years old or so, and what a beautiful place it was. And I really think it's in the best interest of the whole region to, restore the Salton Sea to what it was, which would require the import of water. And with that, I'll cede back the floor, and hopefully you'll take the opportunity and at the end of this meeting to review the charts I submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jasmine Phillips, would you like to speak?
Good morning. My name is Jasmine Phillips. I'm with the Desert Shores Channels Restoration Oversight Committee. We would like to thank the authority for their continued interest in moving the project forward. We have received and reviewed the scope of services draft documents and have a few recommendations. But at this time, I'd just like to express the committee's desire to be involved in upcoming opportunities mentioned in the scope of services. Upon the notice to proceed, we request the Salton Sea Authority ensure the Oversight Committee is in attendance for the kickoff meeting to review and provide comments on the scope of work. We also request the authority ensure the Oversight Committee can review and provide comments on the 60% design plans and specifications. We also feel meeting with the authority on a quarterly basis is insufficient and would like to recommend the Salton Sea Authority hold regular meetings with the Oversight Committee on a monthly basis for project updates. The community is also eager to see the project started, but more importantly, to have the project move beyond the design and permitting phases to an actual physical construction and successfully completed project. Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Madam Secretary.
There were no more, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, we will go on to board member comments. This is a time set aside for members of the board to share their thoughts and concerns regarding general authority matters not on the agenda. Ask any questions of staff or any request that items be added to future agendas at a future date. The Brown Act expressly prohibits discussions rather than comments, especially of items that are not on the agenda. So with that, we will go to those attending via Zoom first. Madam Secretary, I do believe you have a much better view on screen as who is on attendance and who is not. So could you help me by going down the list?
Any directors online want to speak? Would you raise your hand or unmute? Director Hanks, were you in meeting?
Yeah,
Director Hanks?
Are you talking with me right now? I was having difficulty unmuting. I have no comments.
Thank you, Director Hanks.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any others, and they should be able to unmute.
Okay, if there are no other director comments online, we will come back to Chambers. Director Cardenas?
Yes, good morning. I do want to thank everybody for being here today, and then also apologize for some of the technical issues we're having, but do appreciate staff coming together and making, turning lemons into lemonade. But this is a very important meeting. I did receive a memorandum from our director, Mr. O'Dowd, and I just wanted to make sure that if this is a public document, that it be provided to the public. I think it's a very noteworthy and well thought out letter that maybe needs to be shared with the public. I'm going to pause right there, and if I may, Mr. Chair, and just confirm that this document is going to be available to the public, or is a document that's available to the public? It is available to the public, Director Cardenas, and will be part of the discussion on a later item. Thank you. Also, I do want to definitely welcome the discussion as we address some of the issues related to the Salton Sea and the impact by the Colorado River situation. It's my understanding that Lake Mead is at 1029 as of today in terms of an elevation level, and that is something of grave concern to me, and looking forward to the Salton Sea Authority taking a leadership role when it comes to the prevention of unmitigated impacts as they relate to economic, social, and environmental issues along the sea. Clearly understand that the Salton Sea Authority's position and lane is addressing some of the public health and habitat issues, and hopefully we stay in that lane and continue to advocate in the best interest of our surrounding area from a public health and environmental standpoint. Thank you.
Is Director Torres from Torres Martinez? I have no comments.
Oh, my mic is off. Thank you, Director Cortez. Okay, so where I was headed, there is obviously a lot of moving and changing factors, a lot of information becoming available that, although it does not change the end goal of this organization, definitely is worth reassessing how we are getting to where we are headed. For that purpose, I would like to ask Mr. O'Dowd that perhaps he begins working on setting up a strategic planning session, a retreat type session that we can attend and come together. Possibility of this being done within the first quarter of next year or before if possible. There's a lot of information coming forth, a lot of reports that we've been waiting for a long time that are all coming up now. They're, providing information in a different way to the community that perhaps it's an opportunity for us as an authority to sit down and work through this and see where we go and how we go next to achieve our final goal. So if you can work on that, I'd appreciate it. Second of all, there was a draft Blue Ribbon, a draft report from the Blue Ribbon Lithium Committee or Commission that was recently released, and it is in draft form. I do believe that they have 3 community meetings left. Might be a combination of in-person and or Zoom. I would like to see this body review the draft document strictly as it relates to how it affects the Salton Sea. This group was tasked with viewing about 8 to 10 different areas, I believe. Everything from economic impact to environmental, And obviously, a lot of those will affect the Salton Sea. So I'd like to see us comment before the comment period and the final report comes out. That is it for now. So if there are no other comments, we will go on to agenda item number 4, special presentations. Mr. O'Dowd, can you go ahead and take this one on?
Sure. I believe Douglas Ordonez with Riverside County may be on the line. If he is, he will introduce Charles.
Good morning, members of the
Greeley.
board. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Good morning, we
Okay.
hear you.
Good morning. This is Douglas Ordonez with the Executive Office for the County of Riverside. Just to give you a quick update on the North Lake demonstration project. Can you
Just
see
very
me?
quickly,
Only hear me.
just very quickly, Douglas, I'm on, just to let everybody know, I'm having difficulties where I'm actually trying to log in, the Supervisor Perez, but I am on, I'm able to at least listen, and I guess you can hear me at the minimum.
We can hear you.
We hear
Okay,
you.
thank you.
All right. When complete, the North Lake demonstration project will construct an approximately 156 acre lake to provide both shallow and deep water habitat near the North Shore Beach and Yacht Club. The lake is planned to restore and manage habitat for fish and birds, control dust, and provide recreational opportunities. In April of 2021, the Salton Sea Authority received a $19.25 million grant from Proposition 68 from the California Department of Water Resources on behalf of the Salton Sea Management Program to plan and construct the North Lake Pilot Demonstration Project. Over the last 7 months, the county had issued an RFP for a firm to work on the design and engineering services for the project. We received 3 bids, held interviews, and in August, we executed a 2-year agreement with the selected firm, Dudek Consulting. So now I'd like to pass the presentation along to Chuck Greeley, who will give you further update on the work that we've been working on.
And before we get started, Mr. President, members of the board, I just thought it would be helpful and useful and timely to have Dudek come in and make a presentation to the board of the design process, all the elements, the board and the public of all the elements that go into the design of a project of this scope and scale, and the things that they might see along the way so that they can engage and participate in the process. Mr. Greeley.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and directors. It's a pleasure to be here today. Really excited to work on this project. Before we get into some of the details, I did want to just give a little bit of background about Dudek. So Dudek was founded in 1980 by a couple of ex-Regional Water Quality Board members in San Diego, and has since evolved into over 700-person multidiscipline environmental and engineering firm. We've had a Coachella Valley office for over 25 years. I myself am a principal in Dudek and local in our office here in La Quinta. We're 100% employee-owned, which we're extremely proud of. We answer to ourselves. For the purposes of the North Lake Pilot Demonstration Project, we did partner with WSP, who's a global giant engineering firm that brings a wealth of experience and capabilities to augment and add to the experience that Dudek provides. Just want to highlight the fact that Dudek and WSP combined really do know issues around the Salton Sea. We've worked on these issues for many years, including projects such as the North Shore Yacht Club dredging project, constructed wetland and habitat projects for the Coachella Valley Water District at Garfield Street and Johnson Street, the Species Conservation Habitat Project at the south end of the sea for CDFW and DWR, and backbone infrastructure projects for Imperial Irrigation District. So getting into the North Lake design scope of work briefly, just want to highlight some of the large scope of work tasks that we will be endeavoring. It's a comprehensive scope of work that does carry us through preliminary and final engineering. There'll be numerous tech studies, survey, geotechnical investigations, preliminary design, habitat assessment, cost estimating, and ultimately final design and specifications for construction. So just highlighting on some of those topics that we'll be evaluating as part of our design. This really is a project that focuses on water, much like the sea itself. There's important factors in how we obtain that water, how we use that water, and how we maintain that water. And I'll get into each of those topics briefly. Water supply is obviously of utmost importance. So part of our initial tasks, and we've been working with this with a variety of stakeholders, is evaluating surface water resources, Colorado River water through the Coachella Canal, stormwater runoff, as well as tile drain water that may be available, as well as looking at local groundwater resources, looking at the various groundwater basins in the area, looking at yield and sustainability for that groundwater, and then certainly addressing water quality, of the potential groundwater resources with potential treatment and wetlands into the lake. Geotechnical site investigations should be commencing shortly. We're working with IID and BLM to get those permissions. Those are going to be critical to the overall project. The sea is a unique site underlain with numerous clay soil materials that are soft and non-compressible. And so getting out there and understanding that site conditions to better drive how we design embankments and the lake itself is really going to be critical. I'm wondering if I can do that. There we go. So as you can see on some of these videos here, this is one of our geotechnical engineers looking at the site early on in a project, and just with a bare minimum of shaking of his feet, you can see just how dynamic that soil condition is. And then similarly with the second video, a soil probe that with bare minimum pressure just goes straight into the ground. So getting out there, getting that equipment on site, doing our testing is going to be critical to the progression of the project. That's going to lead us into our civil engineering design. So how do we perform excavation and dredging to create not only lake, but the berms that will sustain that lake and protect it? So there's going to be a number of methodologies and approaches we take that's based on that geotech evaluation. And water quality is certainly paramount. Once we create the lake and bring water into it, how do we maintain that water quality for habitat as well as recreational purposes? So we'll be looking at numerous water quality modeling techniques, looking at predictive demand under potential climate change scenarios, looking at nutrients and TDS and selenium concentrations over time, as well as simulating various treatment methodologies. What we really want to avoid is that eutrophication process that has really impacted the Salton Sea thus far. We want to keep this as a healthy environment for habitat and recreation. We have some wonderful habitat designers who'll be working on the project, looking at a variety of habitats, as Douglas mentioned, shallow and deep water within the open lake, looking at some nearshore lakeside wetlands and managed wetlands, some treatment areas, and even opportunities to maybe capture surface runoff and treat that prior to allowing it into the lake itself. With that, I thank you for your time and look forward to continue to work with Salton Sea Authority staff, Riverside County, and the various agencies on this project.
Any questions from the board?
Very, very exciting project. Do we have any questions from directors?
I'll just ask a couple questions, just in regards to the easements and those APNs, have they been identified already?
We have identified the APNs right now for access for the geotechnical work. And then as the design progresses, any potential acquisitions for the lake itself, we do have that in our scope of work to assist with that, but that will be down the road once we've gotten into the prelim design.
And then that effort is being spearheaded by Riverside County. They're taking the lead on site acquisition.
Okay. But the ask has been made formally to the IID that these are the identified APNs?
It has.
And can I just confirm, are you working with IID Real Estate, Water, Energy?
The real estate division, yes.
Perfect.
And that's for the temporary encroachment permits at this point to get the geotechnical crews out there for the explorations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cardenas. Do we have any other directors that may have questions?
I can go ahead and jump in.
Go ahead.
This Supervisor Perez, I see Consuelo Director Estrada's hand raised as well. But if I could just quickly just jump in here. And I apologize, Director Estrada.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's make it clear that this is not another study, right? I mean, we have to make sure that people understand that we're actually are progressing and we're trying to get something done. And I think that's important as we move forward as an organization, that this is just not another study and that we are actually trying to make sure that we not only are shovel ready in case there's more money coming in the future, but we actually, put shovels in the ground and move some dirt. And so I think that's important as we move forward. And as you discuss, is that Dudek who just spoke?
Yes, it was.
All right. I think that's important. Number one. And another point I want to make as far as County of Riverside and that we're taking a lead. Okay, to what degree are we taking a lead? Because I like to know. Because I need to make sure that we as a County of Riverside are moving this agenda on our end as quickly as possible, as efficient as possible, as effective as possible. People are tired of hearing all this stuff, right? And I think we are too. So I just want to make sure that as we say out loud, Patrick, our executive director, that the County of Riverside is leading that charge. Okay, to what degree? Because I need to make sure as a supervisor that I pushed that agenda. And so I'd like to know a little bit more about what does that look like? What are we in charge of here? Are we actually in charge? Are we actually moving this agenda forward? And if not, let's speak to it. And let's get it done. So I want to put that out there.
So thank you for the question, Supervisor Perez. Riverside County has vast experience at land acquisition for public process. Juan Perez has done an outstanding job of taking a strong leadership role in making sure this project is moving forward in a timely basis. But the state resources have also been involved, as well as the authorities and now DUDEX. So it's a collaborative effort to secure these rights of ways necessary. But we are leaning on the state's experience in this manner to make sure we do it timely and do it right. I mean, the county, I apologize.
All right, well, that sounds nice, but I don't think that's enough. And so I'd like to know, what can we do as a county of Riverside to really move this agenda maybe a little quicker? What do we need to do, Dudek? Let us know to make sure we don't lose a step here. I need to make
your
sure.
Your comments are not dissimilar to Director Cardenas in that, IID has lands that are involved with this project, and I think everybody is interested in making sure that there are no unnecessary delays, that this is move forward on a timely basis. So we are coordinating with all affected agencies. There are 4 landowners involved with this project, and there is some private ownership, and we are resolving all of the issues to make sure that this moves forward timely. All right. Getting this engineering effort done is critical to putting shovels in the ground, though. So getting this kicked off and underway is a tremendous milestone in the life of this project.
Well, I could appreciate all that. Just know that we've been waiting for this for 40 years. And so with that being said, I'm going to challenge my colleagues here, and including yourself, Patrick, that we move this agenda, we push forward. Let's not be afraid. Let's speak to it like we need to. And if the County of Riverside is not doing its part, then I need to, because I want to make sure we move this agenda. Ordonez, I know you're listening. I need you to take this back to staff. I need you to take this back to Juan. Juan's a good person. I appreciate him. Good work. But there's no more. We've got no more time. So I'm gonna challenge us as a Salton City Authority to push this agenda, if that makes any sense. And I see Lisa on as well, and I know Lisa did a great job for us. I'm just frustrated like everybody else. I'm laying it out right now. And I see now Horacio, you're on the hook too, brother.
Absolutely, sir. This is Douglas from the County of Riverside. Thank you for your comments, and I appreciate your feedback.
I'm out my soapbox. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Perez. Director Estrada?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Chuck, I know Chuck for a while. It's good to have him on the team. It looks like he's doing a great job. I'll just add that, kind of give some credit here to staff. I know that, staff on the Salton Sea Authority has been meeting with the County of Riverside staff, including Juan, including other folks from the county, from your office, Supervisor, from folks from CVWD, almost on at least a bi-weekly basis with folks from the state. And to me, that shows that there's a high level of commitment from all the various agencies to move a lot of different components of this project that are critical to us breaking ground. I don't know if maybe it might be helpful to include IID in some of those working meetings. Maybe you have a separate meeting for that. Maybe the meeting that you're having with us at CVWD was more specifically on the water supply situation, and I trust that you're having those recurring meetings also on other tasks related to land acquisition and permits and things like that. But I think at least for me personally, I do have a sense that the team is moving this project at a pace that is receiving a lot of attention. I know that we've assigned some critical staff at CVWD to make sure that we're providing information solutions as fast as possible. So I just want to thank you, Patrick, for handling that. Thank Juan, thank everybody who's kind of been part of those working groups. The other thing that I just wanted to try to scratch on is I think in some of the exhibits that you showed, Chuck, Mr. Greeley, I think I saw maybe some wells that you were showing. It looked to me like it was like pipeline that was. It almost looked like a water conveyance, and I'm wondering if you've already identified potential wells that perhaps would be supplying groundwater to the lake, or maybe just explain to me what I was looking at one of those exhibits that it looked to me like it was a water well, at least 2 different locations. And then if we could get a copy of the presentation, I don't believe that I saw it, so I'd like to get a copy of it. And those are my comments.
Certainly, thank you, Cassio, and I can speak to the well item. We certainly have been working with DWR and CVWD staff collaboratively to look at water supply issues and where we may be able to obtain that water. I think this is the exhibit you were referencing there. One of the tasks we're looking at right now is evaluating potentially which groundwater basin we may want to further investigate or prioritize as a source of water for the lake. There's several Indio subbasin, Orocopio, as well as Chocolate Mountain subbasin groundwater areas are local and in close proximity to the North Lake project area. Indio, we're probably trying to stay away from just because of its importance as drinking water to the Coachella Valley. Orocopio and Chocolate are not considered priority basins by DWR. They do have some water quality impairment from drinking water perspective, higher salinity, for instance. So we're evaluating those, trying to prioritize those, looking at which may have the highest sustainability and best yield for the lake. So that's really one of the initial tasks that we're evaluating right now.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Greeley. Are those? And I'm sorry, but on my screen the page is somewhat blurry, so I can't read. I can't read the detail on some of the exhibits, but on the lower exhibit where you have what I imagine is the well. Are those 3 wells that you're looking into? does that say proposed well?
It does. This is highly conceptual. This is some exhibits that we initially put together as part of our proposal process. So take this with a dose of skepticism, as this is really just a conceptual level at this point. And we'll be further refining these as the scope commences.
And then, are any of these proposed wells existing wells, or they would be just new wells that you are kind of just looking at a high level? And then just for a sense of distance, how far are these?
So there are a number of existing wells in the area that we're looking at and trying to pull data from as part of our evaluation. The scope of work and project envisions some new wells that would be dedicated for supply to the sea. In terms of distance, that's going to be driven by which basin we end up prioritizing for groundwater resources. The Chocolate Mountain Basin is within probably a half a mile, and these are rough numbers. The lake itself, the majority of it is located within the Indio Subbasin, and the Oricopio Basin, I believe, is within about a mile and a half. And again, these are rough numbers, so understand these are approximate.
Thank you. And then the last question here, and it's probably the most important one, the elephant in the room is, are we in need of asking for more budget? Is that something that we should be seriously working on, or is all of this accomplished with the budget that we have? I believe we have about maybe close to 20 million, maybe 19 point something million. Do we need to be actively pursuing additional funding, and should we be doing that now? If the answer is yes, what are our plans to secure the additional funding that might be required now to implement all these other aspects of the project? Maybe that's a question for both you and Mr. O'Dowd.
So I'll take that first. That subject has come up in every conversation we've had with the state. Obviously, costs are going up. This grant was made available to us some years ago. So when our original estimates are going to be understated as to what this project likely will cost, this design effort will inform that cost and will better facilitate the ask for additional funds. But from the secretary on down, we've received every assurance from the state that this project is a priority project, and that there are a variety of different sources to get the funds from. But once we know how much to ask for, we'll be more diligent about securing those specific funds necessary to take this project through to completion.
Thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Director Estrada. Any additional questions from directors online? Okay, appearing to be none. We will go ahead and move on. Thank you very much for the presentation, and those graphics are very, very nice. I commend you on the conceptual rendition of these. They're very motivating, if you will.
Appreciate that. I'll share that with the team. We've got a great graphics team who was really excited to work on this. So thank you again for the time today.
Looking forward to the work. Okay, we'll go on to agenda item number 5. This is the consent items. Would like to open for discussion. If there's any discussion from members of this body, items 1 through 7 of agenda item number 5A. Appearing to be no director comments. Do we have any comments from the public?
No, Mr. Chairman. Well, actually, Michael Cohan, is this on the consent calendar only? If not, would you lower your hand, please, for a moment?
No comment. Excellent. Well, then I will entertain motions.
I motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Santillanes, second by myself. Madam Secretary, will you please take a roll call vote?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Plancarte,
Yes.
Director Kelly, Director Perez,
Yes.
Director Hewitt, not here. Director Santillanes,
Yes.
Director Tortes,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Yes.
Director Estrada,
Yes.
Director Cardenas,
Yes.
Director Hanks.
Yes.
Unanimous, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Going on now to agenda item number 5B. This is the 2023 board meeting calendar and recommendations. Mr. O'Dowd?
Mr. President, members of the board, this is largely a procedural matter to establish meeting dates for next year. Historically, and the dates that have been established represent our typical meeting date on the fourth Thursday of the month, typically, but not always, based on certain broadly identified conflicts that the board has prepared. What we did this year differently is we reserved a date in each calendar month, recognizing that it could be a particularly busy year. We've had a couple of times this year where we've had to move the meetings around. We had some gaps. We had to have some meetings. It's expected that a number of these meetings, at the direction of the executive committee, will likely be canceled if the business matter is not pressing, particularly in the summer months, as we typically do. But we wanted to get dates on calendars for planning purposes for the board, so that if we did need to meet, we had those dates planned. And with that, I would recommend the board's approval of the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. O'Dowd. Do we have any comments from directors?
None that I see.
I make the motion to approve the calendar, Mr. Chair.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion by Director Perez, a second by Director Cardenas. Madam Secretary, will you please do a roll call vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Plancarte,
Yes.
Director Perez,
Yes.
Director Santillanes,
Yes.
Director Tortes,
Yes.
Director Bianco,
Yes.
Director Estrada,
Yes.
Director Cardenas,
Yes.
and Director Hanks.
Yes.
Unanimous, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, we will now move on to agenda item number 5C. This is a follow-up discussion of the Colorado River shortage and possible impacts on the Salton Sea and the region. Mr. O'Dowd?
Mr. President, my presentation will be relatively brief. This is a continuation of a discussion that started back in June when Commissioner Salton announced at a Senate hearing that there was a need to conserve 2 to 4 million acre feet of water on the Colorado River, and there needed a determination from the member states by August 16th. That set in motion efforts by staff to understand precisely what that meant to our region and our communities. That effort continues. The August 16th date came, and the August 16th date went, and the commissioner took no action other than what was prescribed under existing agreements. But the negotiations between the 7 basin states and the Bureau continue. This week we received a correspondence from the Colorado River Board of California that they were prepared to consider, and I don't want to put words in their mouths. There's a letter that's in your package that specifically says what they will and won't do, but they've identified opportunities to conserve some 400,000 acre feet of water, but are expecting that other states participate and that monies would become available from the Inflation Reduction Act to help facilitate those conservation measures. Yesterday, there was a press release and a public document put forth by the Department of Interior that defined certain programs for Colorado River water users to conserve water, providing some resources from the federal government out of that IRA in order to accomplish some of the goals. It's unclear to us exactly how much water would be, how much less water would be flowing into our communities, and therefore how much less water would be flowing to the sea as a result of this. We are not a party to those conversations. We are not privy to the negotiations, but we are concerned as a joint powers agency of what the impacts associated with these conservation measures might have on the sea and the region. We understand, based on our prior meetings with Secretary Crowfoot, Commissioner Towton, and others, that the state is doing an evaluation of what those impacts might be at the sea. The question is whether or not we want to rely upon, solely rely upon the assessment of the state for those impacts. And then beyond that, how will those impacts be mitigated, and what time frame will they be mitigated under? As we all have experienced, the QSA was signed in 2003, and the implementation of that agreement has taken place over the last 20 years. You can go out to the sea now as opposed to the sea 20 years ago and see the measurable impacts that have occurred as a result of that agreement. The state of California agreed over and above the commitments made by the transfer partners in the QSA to restore the sea, and they have only recently begun really owning that effort. They've done a good job in recent years, so I don't want to diminish the work that the state has done. But the concern is that this additional curtailment, these additional conservation measures, will double the amount of work that the state or somebody will have to do to ensure that these matters are properly mitigated and the risks associated with them are properly abated. So what we have done a few weeks ago when we first started this conversation, we said if this was a normal conventional undertaking, it would be evaluated in a number of using a number of state and federal processes. It's not likely, because of the urgent nature of this, that we're going to be able to pursue that. So we are trying to be facilitators. We want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. But at the same time, we are all concerned about how this will impact our community now and forever. So we began conversations with an engineering firm with particular expertise in NEPA assessments and other environmental evaluations, and said, if we're not going to do a full-blown NEPA analysis, what type of, how would you advise a client on how you might get your arms around the potential risks associated with this, and make sure that when the deal is done, that no harm is done. So the staff's recommendation is that we continue in that effort. We believe that should not be an undertaken directly by the authority in and of ourselves, but that we should partner with the federal government. If the state does the assessment, the authority and federal government should underwrite that and make sure that we all agree that the work of the state is underwritable, and that the risk associated with it are understood, that the impacts to the community are telegraphed to the community, that the outreaches are in place to make sure that everybody knows what's being done, how it's being done, when it's being done, and by who. And so that's what I wanted to invite the board to discuss today, to provide us some guidance. I think that this is going to happen. It's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen fairly quickly. And I just want to make sure that we, collectively, the Salton Sea Authority, does what we can to contribute to the success of this important undertaking, because it's complicated, and our communities will be affected, and they will be wanting to know what's going on as this moves forward. So with that, I'll pause and either invite questions or afford the board an opportunity to discuss it amongst yourselves. Is your mic on, Mr. President?
Keep forgetting that microphone. You figure by now Before I bring it back to this body for questions or comments, we do have a request for public comment. I'll go ahead and take that now, and that'll also enrich the information that we have as we discuss this amongst the directors. Mr. Eric Montoya Reyes.
Good morning, Salton Sea Authority. Eric Reyes for the record, 1135 Appleway Brawley, Executive Director of the nonprofit Los Amigos de la Comunidad. And I come here seeking support, not just a discussion, but support today, something concrete and strong from the Salton Sea Authority, that you send a strong message to the entities, starting with the federal government, involved in the negotiations you are not involved in, I understand, for the 400,000 acre-feet of water California recently offered to help alleviate the continued elevation drop at Lake Mead to prevent a potential dead pool, as they say, where we have no water deliveries. I am in no way saying there isn't an issue. I am not in any way not saying that we can't do that. It's imperative that we keep the elevation up, but at this same time, as Mr. Dowd said, there has not been an analysis, nor has there been any information coming out of the entities involved of what those impacts will be. We are already suffering as a community of the QSA that was forced upon us by the federal government and went into a forced water transfer instead of a voluntary transfer. And the impact of that 20 years ago, as Mr. Dawson, is relevant, prevalent, and potentially disastrous. Only recently has the Salton Sea Authority started implementing programs that are constructive to that issue that we have. But we're far, far behind the curve of how far the shoreline has receded and the health and environmental impacts that it has caused. And now you're going to add an additional transfer of water. And I say it's a water transfer even though it's being held behind Lake Mead. Anytime it is not delivered to the IID and we can no longer call for it from the irrigation district, it is a transfer of that right of that water. So this current water transfer that is being forced upon us, once again, under dire conditions, again, I'm not going to be naive to that, has to be mitigated. And the money that you just passed out in the information you sent out is ridiculous. It's only going to be able to pay for water conservation. The irrigation district pays $285 an acre foot at this time, or a little less. So there is no money for environmental and health impacts. Where will that money come from if it doesn't come from this water issue here? I implore the Salton Sea Authority to make sure human rights of the communities of Riverside and Imperial counties that border the Salton Sea and the respective tribal nations are respected through a strong and forceful unified voice from the Salton Sea Authority. Ya basta, como dice la raza. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Okay, I will then bring it back to this board. Any directors wishing to speak on this matter?
I guess I'll just jump right in, Mr. Chair, if I can, or if I may. So the way I understand your comments, Mr. O'Dowd, what's maybe before this board for consideration, and I see that this item is as information/discussion, is the possible opportunity to explore an independent analysis in regards to the potential impacts. Is that kind of the way I'm understanding an ask here, or a potential ask from you, sir?
That's kind of what makes sense to us at this time. You know, this is kind of an unusual phenomenon, and we're trying to answer the question after the decision is made that the transfers are going to take place, what next? And so we think that we're going to get some information from the state, and so what do we do with it? So thank you.
So, and just in regards to funding, or pursuing funding, or do we have placeholders in our budget potentially to address this request?
So we believe that part of the funds that are included within the Inflation Reduction Act were intended, the Part 3 of the Inflation Reduction Act was for mitigating impacts associated with this. So we believe that these costs should be covered by those monies and should be made available through the federal government in order to satisfy the concerns of this impacted or potentially impacted region.
So the premise for making the request, is it because we're anticipating that NEPA and CEQA are not going to be followed in regards to these potential water contributions?
So I'm not foreclosing that they would or would not be followed. We are considering what tools we might make available to accommodate this important broad public challenge that we're facing. So this would be a consideration to evaluate whether or not it meets that threshold burden of satisfying the concerns of the communities with respect to the proposed actions, whatever they are. And I would like to if I could, Ms. Lisa Moore is on the phone too. She could probably better address this than me if you would like me to.
I'm not sure I could better address it, but I just to backtrack just a little bit. So the IRA legislation that we're talking about, right, had $4 billion in it for conservation, really associated with this drought on the Colorado River. One subset of that funding is specifically designated for environmental mitigation. We're at the Salton Sea, right? So it's water conservation measures to result in wet water for Lake Mead, but it is also Congress recognized that that's going to have an impact on the Salton Sea, and so those funds are to be, are there, right, and super flexible, I might add as well. So, then you have kind of the California letter saying we're looking at 400,000 acre feet. Then yesterday we got a letter from Interior saying sort of the initial rollout for that $4 billion, and you had sort of a really like a 3-part program that only entitlement holders, so water users, could apply for. One is we propose conserving this amount of water, and this is under a 1-year agreement. This is the acre foot payment, 2-year, 3-year, so on. There's a second category where water users could put in a proposal that would do that, but potentially do other things as well, including, proposing that the federal government address this mitigation concern, which again is explicitly provided for as a use of the $4 billion in the IRA. One thing to note in this document is that when water users come forward and propose water conservation, Interior in this document is saying that the environmental compliance associated with that water conservation falls on the proponent, that water user. To my mind, and what the authority's position has been historically on questions like this, is that this is a demand from the federal government, and that and both the assessment and mitigation associated with whatever conservation measures are proposed should fall on the federal government to fund, both on the assessment side, whether it's a formal NEPA assessment or essentially, right, a truncated but meaningful assessment of what the impacts are going to be. We haven't known until really we saw that letter what the number might be on an annual basis for these next several years. And so, I think the question of how do we fund it and who pays, I think Congress spoke to this and said there's $4 billion there, and part of that $4 billion is meant to address the Salton Sea. We really can't meaningfully put a number to that until we have an assessment of that. And so, my hope would be, under this funding announcement, we might be able to work together to get that assessment funded through the IRA funds, either through this this funding opportunity or just offline in discussions that we could have with the contractors and with the state and the feds, as opposed to other times when water transfers have been on the table. there is a federal government is awash in cash right now. This $4 billion is on top of $8 billion from a prior bill the year before. The federal government can't with a straight face say they don't have the resources to fund an assessment. They actually have a legal obligation to do that. I would say that is not a water user obligation. It's really Interior's obligation to fund that assessment so that we can have a mitigation program that's actually based on, a real assessment of impacts. And so I think all of that is possible with the funding that's been provided and really what Congress envisioned some of this money would go towards.
Thank you, Lisa. Mr. Chair, if I may continue? Continue. So I guess what my first priority is that our region does not carry the public health burden, the economic and environmental burden of the unfortunate situation that we're in. So that's my first priority. My second priority would probably be alignment. And so what I want or I'm pursuing is any request for an independent analysis that there is ultimate alignment with federal and state efforts. Again, I do welcome the request, but don't necessarily want to supplant the efforts of other agencies. As we know, there's multiple players involved, from the Army Corps of Engineers, DOI, DOE, BOR. They're all players along with the upper and lower basin. And these comments are not in relation to a water right. I'm conflicted somewhat because I represent an agency that's a Section 5 contractor, but also sit on the Salton Sea Authority, and public health and habitat is obviously a priority when it comes to this. So, Ms. Moore, if I may ask, how can we ensure that an independent analysis will be aligned with federal, state, and local efforts? And that's specifically related to environmental, social, and economic impacts as we deal with elevation building in Lake Mead potentially.
Well, so the last understanding I have from the Bureau of Reclamation's presentation to this board, when we kind of asked that question, they demurred and said it was I believe IID's responsibility to assess those impacts. So as far as I'm aware, the federal government isn't, and we asked the Reclamation Department to give a briefing today, and they, I think, passed on that request as well. So I think it may be as simple as really having a meaningful meeting together to discuss, where are we on an assessment of the impacts? How fulsome is the work the state's doing, and what resources could the federal government bring to that effort with these new IRA resources, which frankly didn't exist, I think, when the state started to work towards an assessment, so that we really get a meaningful assessment of those impacts, such that the authority members and the community would be kind of comfortable with that understanding. And then a mitigation program would be based off of that, right? So the trouble we have, I think, now in attempting to advocate for, public health and environmental mitigation of this, a new water transfer, is we're really in the dark on that assessment. And I think a little bit in the dark on what the state's doing. So I think it really is just in working together as partners to really understand what's being assessed, and to look at those IRA resources and say, could we do a little bit better than maybe the state had the resources to do, several months ago before this legislation passed.
So if I might briefly, I think that a proper characterization of Reclamation's response to our request would be that they felt that they couldn't provide any additional information other than what they provided us. What we were told is that they expect within the next week or two that there would be a more fulsome program and proposal put forth by the Bureau that would be appropriate to explain in this venue. I don't know whether or not the information released yesterday was part and parcel of that anticipated release, but they just felt, as was the state, that there was really no material change since the last time they presented to us. So I didn't want to look like they gave us a short shrift. They did respond saying that they would get back to us. In addition to that, from the state's perspective, we understand that there will be within the next couple of meetings, a follow-up meeting with the Secretary and federal agencies with representatives from the authority. So we are expecting another update like we've had in the past in the coming weeks, once we can get that scheduled.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple more questions, if I may.
Please do so.
Ms. Lisa Moore, in regards to pursuing funding for an independent analysis, do you believe that that is a realistic ask in regards to the IRA funding? Do you think that's an eligible and realistic ask that we can pursue funding for?
I do think it's an eligible ask, and I think our delegation frankly expects that there's going to be some assessment of impacts on the city, right? So this came from Congress, right? And so, yeah, I do. I mean, not to be, time is short. There's obviously a very significant crisis here, right? We're not going to be looking at an environmental impact statement. Having said that, there is still an assessment of impacts that really the feds are required to do, that the recent solicitation is actually trying to place it at the water user's doorstep. So I think it's in everyone's interest to understand kind of what the impacts are going to be so that we can simply budget for them, right? The question, I think historically, I think it would be difficult, Director, to get that assessment because people would be afraid of what it would turn up, right? In this case, there's a lot of, there's a lot of funding around in this agency, in the other federal agencies that could bring resources to bear to help mitigate here that we've been engaged with in the past. And so I don't think there's anything to be afraid of for the federal government to help fund making sure we have a true assessment of what the impacts are. It doesn't have to take a long time, right? I mean, IID's done a lot of, you've done your own modeling of playa impacts just from the QSA. And so I think it's really trying to make sure we have an assessment that the directors, people can rely on and the community can rely on. And I think it'll be key to getting buy-in from the community that something like that is done. There's nothing in the legislation. In fact, the legislation contemplates, right? If you're going to do mitigation of an environmental problem, you have to assess it, right? So there's nothing in there that runs counter to that at all. And just because, so Interior put out this proposal yesterday, it doesn't mean that contractors and others can't talk to them about having another category of expenditure in this case.
This leads to my last question. There was a public comment and a claim that the $330 an acre foot that's included in year one of the drought mitigation funding, that's inadequate in regards to addressing the social, environmental, and economic impacts as it relate potentially to our region. Are you in agreement with that statement? And I apologize for the loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that seems like it's not workable from the place where we sit, right, as a community. So I think, when I read it, I got stuck on 1A. There is 1B, right? So you can apply for 1A, which is, they've basically designated an acre foot number. But then there's 1B, which to me contemplates more, an entity like IID or another water user could really put together a proposal that contemplated not only a water right curtailment, but the mitigation, the evaluation and mitigation associated with that. And so I look at 1B and I sort of say, well, there's no particular reason why, and aside from the fact that this is all due on November 21st, which is not very far away, that a water user could, working with the community, couldn't put together a proposal to have a higher acre foot number or an acre foot number plus a mitigation number, right? The document itself, at the last paragraph, says the proponent, right, the applicant, is required to do all the environmental compliance, right? My own personal view is that shouldn't fall on the water users who are coming. The cost of that assessment and mitigation shouldn't fall on the water users that are being asked to step forward to take, significant cuts to their water entitlement to stabilize the system. So.
Well, I appreciate the information, Mr. Chair and Mr. O'Dowd. I'm in support of us possibly exploring further the opportunities for an independent analysis based on the fact that the current funding mechanism and mitigation funding that's available appears to be short and doesn't necessarily include the potentials when it involves economic, social, and environmental impacts. I think that's what creates demand for an independent analysis that provides some sort of customization to our local situation and the potential hazards associated with any type of discussions along the potential drought situation. So I would be in favor of us continuing to explore this. Just needing some help on how we're going to do that.
And I think we're in uncharted waters. I think that it has to be a collaborative process, but it's what we think makes sense. And I note that Director Hanks has his hand raised, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Director Hanks?
But he is muted.
Director Hanks, you have your hand up. Did you want to speak? If you would unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The comment was made by Mr. Reyes and also by Mr. O'Dowd that this is a transfer. From the answers that we received, because we asked specifically about this was considered a transfer or not, based on California Water Code 1031 that I would advise you guys to look at and read through it. We were advised it was not a transfer. So that definition needs to be clarified. I also had kind of warned, for lack of a better word, that we were getting out ahead of ourselves because this is the first feedback that we've had from the Bureau. There has been discussions going between the feds and the state on the Salton Sea, at which even the contractors have not been privy to. So what's transpiring there, I'm not sure, but it is the responsibility of the state to restore the Salton Sea. And I don't want to get too far in there and take ownership of the problem. And I would advise the Salton Sea Authority, you have two water companies that's involved in negotiations at the table. They participated in the letter, and I'm very aware of what's in that letter, that California says that they could commit up to $400,000, but it doesn't say exactly who the contributors are going to be. So you're way out in front, and you're getting into an area where you're going to cause a dispute amongst the partners, the JPA here. And you need to be very careful of where you're at, because there's ongoing negotiations. And we're in a situation, if we reach Deadpool, it's immaterial how the seas mitigate, because there's no water. So we get back to importing the water and the comments that were made in public session and comment period. And I, along with some of the others, are very concerned about the dismissal of importation of water. That's been a subject ever since we had a meeting with the Bureau at the Yacht Club several years ago, and I brought up the question, is it the water or is it the money? Now you're starting to see what the real answer is, which they refuse to answer that time. So let it be known from the DCP and Ms. Moore is very familiar with the DCP, that the IID took the position that the Salton Sea had to be mitigated or there was no deal. And the same way here. There is no deal until on the country, any action that the IID takes until the board takes it. And if it is a transfer, we can't even be approached about another transfer until the board passes a resolution as per Water Code 1031. So be careful. You know, there's ongoing negotiation and strategies, and you guys seem hell-bent and get right in the middle of it and screw it up. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Hanks. Madam Secretary, do we see any other directors expressing interest in speaking?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't.
Okay. So this was a discussion item, no action, not listed as a action item. However, I do believe that we should continue on the path of looking at those options and getting additional information on that.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. We will now go on to agenda item number 6, reports, and we'll start with our federal.
If I could make one for the county.
Who's that on?
Director Hanks.
Mr. Hanks, yes?
Yeah, the comment of CEQA and NEPA. And something that you need to be very aware of. We faced the same thing whenever the DCP was passed, and the only no vote to that was the IID. But there was language in that action taken by Congress that I'm sorry, there was some language that they were trying to backdoor into Congress that had a term that said notwithstanding any other provision of law. I should get a smile out of Ms. Moore on that one. And that type of language, you have to be careful. That's what happened on the All-American when there was some CEQA challenge. There was action as a
I haven't heard of any, we keep in touch with our delegation and the various committees, and I have not heard of any proposal to do that again. We are certainly sensitive to that, Director. And I think just to respond to your prior comments a little bit, I don't, nothing, we certainly don't intend to sort of get in the way, and have respected the fact that this is the water users negotiation happening. As proposals come out and there's money that is going to be afforded, the interest was in just sort of understanding what opportunities there might be in a consensus way to really make sure that the impacts were analyzed, and so that we could put it, there's an interest in Congress and just understanding what the number might be. But I hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Moore. With that, we'll go on to you under reports, federal activities. Ms. Moore, would you like to provide us with an update, please?
I think I have already, so I'll pass it on. I'll pass it on to you will probably tired of hearing from me. I'll pass it on to Horacio for the state.
And Mr. President, I had already provided the response from the Bureau. Jeremy Brooks can't be here today. What's that? If he's here and would like to speak, I certainly would invite him to do so.
Oh, I wasn't going to miss out on this.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Directors
Glad
of the
you could
Board.
join us.
Yeah, I wouldn't have missed it. I think as Patrick has kind of described, I'm a little limited in how much I can say. So, Directors of the Board, thank you for the opportunity to provide you a brief update. So, I got an opportunity to say hello a couple of months ago. I was just selected as the Salton Sea Program Manager about 60 days ago, and as that permanent position for reclamation. Before that, I worked on Endangered Species Act compliance for operation of the river from Mead down to the international boundary of Mexico. A lot of similar type work, big landscape level restoration. So that's just me in terms of background. In terms of what I could say in terms of an update, Patrick and Lisa kind of stole my thunder. They really kind of covered it pretty comprehensively. So, Reclamation has announced that RFP for system conservation initiatives and efficiency programs. And she was sort of spot on that there's a couple of buckets. That's how we've treated it. First bucket is sort of those short-term, the midterm conservation efforts. That's the $300, $365, and $400 per acre foot type payments. And that second bucket is exactly as she described it. It's kind of put forth your proposal. And it's kind of a more of an open-ended question on what the price per acre foot should be. And then that last bucket is for really, and where I think they're hoping that much of the money will go is for longer term, permanent duration type of conservation initiatives and efforts, things like big canal lining projects, capital infrastructure improvements, stuff like that. So just in terms of an update, we're continuing to work with partners in and around the sea, including the authority. I do want to say that I heard Mr. Spear's public comment from the Villa Del Mar Property Association at the opening, and I'll work with Mr. O'Dowd to kind of address those concerns and see where we can kind of provide some assistance in terms of moving that grant forward and making sure that there's an outcome that makes not only the community happy, but everybody in and around the sea, and so that you end up with a functional product. So, I know there's significant interest in the discussions and conversations and negotiations as it relates to conservation on the river, particularly as it relates to impacts of the sea. But since we're right in the middle of sort of negotiations, and this is kind of echoing Director Hanks' comments, we don't have an update to provide at this time. I do know that there is a sincere and meaningful intent to meet with the board soon and brief them on how things are moving forward and where we're at with that. But this is just not the juncture for that. So that kind of is the extent of my update. If there's any questions I can answer, I will try to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Do we have any questions from members of this board? Okay, appearing to be none, we're going to go on to our next report. Horacio, I see you're online. Good morning.
Directors, good morning. It's a pleasure to be before you. In the written report that I submitted, I cited a number of bills and initiatives that the governor signed that will be particularly beneficial to the Lithium Valley. So I won't go over those items individually. What I want to focus my public comments on, however, is in what the governor did not do. One of the items that the governor did not sign was a measure by Assemblymember Garcia that would have appropriated $100 million for the New River and Tijuana River watersheds. The reason why I want to bring that up is because in vetoing the measure, the governor used language where he cited his belief that the state was going to be experiencing lower than expected revenues. And as a result, he was unwilling to commit this significant expense. The governor used almost identical language to veto several dozen bills. And the reason that's important is that because if we are potentially walking into a scenario where the state is going to be in a tighter fiscal situation than it has been during the last 2 years where we saw record surpluses, that is certainly going to affect our ability to draw down state resources. As you recall, the governor had committed about 2 years ago to invest $220 million into the Salton Sea. To date, we have been successful in drawing down $140 million. Our expectation was that the remaining $80 million from that commitment would be included in the upcoming year. But if we are in a situation where revenues are declining and we potentially walk into a budget that is seeing a deficit, that is certainly going to create some hesitation and on the governor's side to include those funds. So it's just something that we're going to have to be cognizant of as we're thinking about resources, not only that the governor has committed, but even with respect to the Colorado River reductions, or even as Mr. Estrada was alluding to earlier, potentially drawing down additional funding for the North Lake. It's just going to be something we're going to have to be monitoring. So far, all we know is that revenues are down about 11% from expectations, with the additional expectation that they were going to be dropping even further. But it's something that is ongoing and something that we're just going to have to keep watching. The governor himself does introduce his budget in January. And that is where we again anticipated seeing that additional 80 million in addition to any additional dollars. But given this developing economic uncertainty, it's just something that we're going to have to be monitoring and potentially have to confront next year as we're doing our advocacy to draw down additional resources. Any questions from directors?
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Do we have any questions for Mr. Gonzalez?
Unseen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Horacio. Appreciate the information. Going on to our next speaker, is Miguel Hernandez online?
Yes, I'm here, Mr. President.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good member, Chairman Plancarte, and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this update on behalf of the Salton Sea Management Program. As you heard before, the independent review panel released 2 documents in September 30th. This was the feasibility and summary reports. The feasibility report provides a detailed analysis of the technical and economic feasibility of importation concepts that were submitted back in 2018 and also last quarter of 2021. Also the summary report describes the overall process for the review, including the major findings from the panel and also the recommendations. With that, and as you might know, these documents are recommendations or another point of information for the consideration of the Long Range Plan Committee. This is not sort of a set in stone decision. This is something that is being considered by the larger Long Range Plan Committee, which is the state is the chair of this committee. Actually, this committee met yesterday to briefly discuss the findings of the independent review panel and in its report and summary, and also get an update on the process of the long range plan and where we currently stand. This long range plan document will be submitted at the end of this year. So we're about 2 months from that point in time that this document needs to be submitted. On yesterday's meeting, the committee discussed a quick timeline on where we currently are at. Actually, as you might recall from a previous update I provided here to this board, there was an evaluation criteria being drafted in collaboration with the committee and also with members of the public during multiple meetings to create that evaluation criteria that has now been discussed or sort of preliminary applied to the concepts that are currently at hand. So that was discussed yesterday, giving or taking into consideration though that criteria that was developed. Also, part of our process or the timeline that we have going forward, government to government consultation with tribal members and tribal consultation will take place from the rest of the month of October, November, also to be incorporated into the long range plan. Also, the comments on the scoring criteria or the scoring evaluation that was presented yesterday, it's also again open for public review, also members of the committee, which some of you are part of this committee. So anyone that's willing to participate or review those initial evaluation, it's welcome to submit their comments to the state. Also, the actual document, the actual long-range plan document is not a set in stone document. This is actually just another stepping stone for what's next in the process. So this document will be submitted in December, and then it goes into another process, sort of a public scoping process for CEQA, and also, all that happens with the analysis there, and also receive comments and continue to build on that plan. So again, that's not set in stone. It's just another milestone that is being achieved. Just a quick update on our veg enhancement projects. As you might know, that those projects, there's actually 3 sites around the sea. So those projects will continue to see, or I expect to see planting resume again during the fall. And now that temperatures are cooling down a little bit, that would allow a better or successful planting at these 3 locations. So again, that will resume in the coming weeks. Also, 2 of the committees, both the engagement committee and the science committee, will be meeting, or expected to meet, in November. We don't have solid dates for that just yet, so we will be making a formal announcement and set those dates in the coming days via our listserv. And with that, also announce that the team is the SSMP team is recruiting for 4 new positions under GWR. One is for a supervising engineer, 2 senior engineers, and a budget analyst. So those positions are available. Those can be found on our website at saltonc.ca.gov, or you can always reach out to the team, and we'll direct anyone that's interested in applying for these positions. We actually have shared this with local folks to help us spread the word about these positions being available. So with that, I conclude my update here today. Thank you again.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from you guys, from members of this body? None appearing. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I appreciate the input. Going on to item 6B3, Salton Sea State Recreation Area Update and Activities. Are they online?
Yes. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, excuse me. Thank you for the opportunity to update the board on the current operations at Salton Sea State Recreation Area. The park is excited to be ramping up operations for the upcoming season. We have started to welcome back a mix of new and returning seasonal and volunteer team members to the rec area. As you know, a successful team operation is dependent on a dedicated team, and we're especially excited at the team we have assembled for the upcoming season. One new team member that I would like to introduce is Mr. Taylor Unzicker. Mr. Unzicker joins the district team as our new Interp and Education Program Manager. We look forward to him leading many new and exciting projects that will enhance the interpretive efforts at Salton Sea State Recreation Area. Our day use areas and campgrounds are fully open and operational. This includes Headquarters Camp, New Camp, Mecca Beach, Corvina, and as well as Salt Creek. Our visitor center is currently open for Wednesday through Sunday, with plans to expand operations to 7 days a week in early November. Interestingly, attendance over the summer was actually down from prior years, with just over 4,000 guests visiting the recreation area between June and September. That breaks down to about 3,500 visitors for day use and about 500 hardy campers that spent the summer day evenings in the park. We are also especially excited to share that the Sea and Desert Interpretive Association, Sunny Bono National Wildlife Refuge, and the Salton Sea State Recreation Area teams will once again be hosting the Salton Sea Bird Festival this coming January 14th in 2023. Festival plans include a north to south birding tour, field walks, and presentations, just to name a few elements. Watch for more information and a flyer coming soon. I thank you for this opportunity to update the board, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Any raised hands for questions? No? Thank you,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Appreciate the input. Going on to Salton Sea Action Committee.
Mr. Pace had to leave, and he emailed me his report. The update he has is that they are holding a stakeholders meeting next Friday, the 21st, at the Fantasy Springs Event Center, starting at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's it.
Thank you. Going on to item D, Executive Director report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I take note of the time and will endeavor to be brief in my remarks. The first thing I'd like to report on is as you know, the authority and the state have been negotiating with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers over the course of the last year to finalize an agreement to implement the Corps feasibility study approved under the 2020 WRDA. I'm pleased to report that that document is believed to be in final form, and there is a signing ceremony which is scheduled to take place on December 16th, tentatively to be located at the North Shore Beach and Yacht Club, subject to its availability. I also wanted to report that the CNRA Community Engagement Scope of Work contract between the Salton Sea Authority and California Department of Natural Resources has been finalized. I thought it was finalized last month, but it actually got modified to a degree. There was $50,000 in the contract, which was for undefined work, and the state contracting officers felt that that was inappropriate. That was removed from the scope of work, and so the contract now is just slightly over $500,000 for a 2-year contract for public engagement, outreach, communications, and education. I'll be working with the Personnel Committee over the coming weeks to operationalize that agreement and expect to have a more detailed presentation next month. Desert Shores was touched on briefly today. We do have an RFP that has been provided to Imperial County for their comments and input and feedback. There were comments about whether the project should proceed as a design build project. The way we have the RFP drafted, it contemplates a design construction management scope of work with the construction of the berm and the wells to be done under separate bid by separate contractors. And we did it that way for 2 reasons. One is, as we've discussed earlier, costs continue to increase, and we're concerned that there may not be sufficient funds in the initial BOR grant to cover the entire scope of work. That will be informed by the design effort. The other is we believe that by doing it that way, it will afford more and local contractors to bid on the actual construction work, which is where some of the substantial dollars are for the project. And we thought that that was the right way to go. We continue to dialogue with community representatives to make sure that we get this right and that it meets the needs of the community, the region, the stakeholders, and all of the parties in interest. Finally, I wanted to touch on the New River, which Horacio touched on earlier. I'm a member of the International Boundary and Water Commission Colorado River Forum, and at our last meeting in Imperial County a couple weeks ago, there was a presentation by the Environmental Management Division on the New River and the water quality in the New River, and I was candidly shocked at the variability of that water. The standard, I understand that the standard for fecal coliform is 1,000 parts per milliliter per 100 milliliter or something, but it measures as high as 2.125 million parts. So I think the difference between 1,000 and 2.125 million is pretty phenomenal. When asked, what regulatory authority they have binationally, there really is none. They only monitor it, and if it's kind of an oops thing if it happens. So I do think that there has been long and substantive binational discussions about how to address the issue, but it is a continuing problem. To mitigate it, the city of Calexico has developed and designed, and with the Salton Sea Authority's contribution of the Prop 68, $10 million, is prepared to implement a bypass project that will move that water from the New River around the city. I also had a chance to meet with City Manager Ms. Colio, and I understand that they're considering several options to move that project forward because of increased costs. They may look at phasing and are looking to secure additional funds to make sure that project is complete. It's important work. The entire New River, from every reach, from the border to the sea, is I think an important part of has always been an important part of the environmental conversation and restoration of the authority, and we continue to look forward to participating with the county, the city, and the stakeholders in the implementation of that project. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. O'Dell. Going on to, I think that covers our agenda. Being no additional matters before this board, just a reminder that our next meeting will be on Thursday, December 8th, 10 a.m., and that will be at the El Centro Imperial County office, Imperial County Board of Supervisors chambers located on Main Street. Having said that, meeting is adjourned.